You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies. Hello and welcome to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast on Rocky Mountain Rooftop, proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Evan Lang, and with me, as always, is Skyler Timmons.
Howdy. My back hurts.
Most of me hurts. I am joining you all today from the 10-day injured list, where I took a spectacularly unspectacular trip and fall and ended up in the emergency department over the weekend. And that's why there was no episode last week.
Mm-hmm.
Don't recommend it. I watch where you're walking and look out for storm drain covers.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if it was like, did the Savannah Bananas do something to you? Like
the Savannah Bananas called me out of the crowd and beat the crap out of me live at Coors Field on Saturday night. If you missed it, it was a heck of a show. I kept begging Spilly, help, why won't you help me? And he just watched.
He watched as he grounded out to shortstop.
That was cool, though. I was at the Savannah Bananas game that Saturday. Getting to see Spilly fully in a uniform and taking at bat was really cool. He did, unfortunately, just ground out. He said his at bat lasted a whole 7 seconds, but still cool to see. Unfortunately, I feel like that's what happens a lot with the guest batters.
It's pretty anticlimactic.
Yeah,
because it's like you would like them to get a hit, but that would also require the pitcher to just give them a meatball.
Yeah, and they've also, they don't travel with the team, they don't practice with the team, anything like that. So any BP they would have taken would have been like maybe that day before the game or something. It happened with Vinny when Vinny was the guest batter last year. What we see a lot more often when you're looking for success, quote unquote success for the Savannah Bananas guest players, is with the pitchers, because they get to do like a full warm up beforehand.
Yeah.
Still very cool though. I really enjoyed it.
That was good.
It was leaving the stadium that got me all
slipping on the banana peel.
More like an broken storm drain cover. And I went down like a sack of potatoes.
No bueno.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Speaking of fun, we've got a lot to cover over the last 2 weeks or so since we missed last week's episode. We might as well just jump right into it here. But first, beforehand, if you are listening in the present, how are you doing that? Because this episode isn't going up until Monday. But as we record right now, it is Friday afternoon, and we are on the eve of Larry Walker celebration weekend at Coors Field that will end on Sunday with the statue of Larry Walker being put up in front of the stadium, which is going to be awesome. And there will be a mini statue giveaway, replica statue, whatever they want to call it, on the day of that game. To point out, from what we have seen of the actual statue, it looks pretty good. We've gotten some previews on the TV broadcast recently, but I know some people were worried because the images that we have of the replicas are a little goofy looking.
Yeah, and hopefully the real product isn't like that, but you just get kind of smushed wonky face on those little, when you're making a little tiny replica type thing. But I don't know, it'd be nice. It's a really nice little giveaway. Wish I could be there to get it, but oh well.
Instead, you can try and find one on eBay for $70.
We'll be lucky if they're $70. But
yeah,
it's just cool that they're having this celebration. It's been long overdue to have some other statues with the player out there in front of Coors Field. So it's nice that Larry's getting that honor, and then, Todd will have his honor in about a month. And it's just hopefully the Rockies do more to honor other players instead of just these two. Charlie Blackmon, let's retire his number, for goodness sake. What are we doing? Let's bring Cargo back and have him retire as a Rocky for a day. Let's mend a bridge with Troy Tulowitzki. Let's celebrate the Blake Street Bombers as a whole. Let's do more of this stuff.
Especially, and if you're talking modern Rockies as well, we need to get DJ LeMahieu back to Coors Field to retire as a Rocky. Like, he's arguably the best second baseman in franchise history, even though, he was only here for, 8 years? Doing the math, like 2012 to 2019 or whatever. But you got to get DJ back, especially when his collegiate wood bat team, I think, just won the championship for their league.
There you
go. Which is very cool.
And it's even just bring these guys back for just a weekend, give away a bobblehead. Like, it doesn't have to be a statue for a bunch of guys, doesn't have to be numbers, but it's, come and celebrate these guys, give away a bobblehead, honor them with a wall where you need a wall of fame or something like that, Hall of Fame for the team itself, where you could just do so much more stuff. And I think it'd be really nice to get more people out to the ballpark and celebrate the club.
We've discussed it before, the need for a Purple Jacket Club of a team Hall of Fame. You can get, EY, you can see if you can get Andres Galarraga or, Matt Holliday, any of those guys out here so that you can celebrate, your past. Honestly, I would say a little bit better than you did back when it was the team's 30th anniversary, because it really felt like they missed a lot of opportunities that year.
Yep. The best way they celebrated was sucking more than anything else. So,
hooray. But it is really nice to see. These statues of Larry and Todd especially are long overdue. I actually wrote about this a couple of years ago of, the Rockies have not done a good job at celebrating their team history around the stadium like other teams do. That brand new ballpark down in Arlington for the Texas Rangers that opened during COVID already has like 3 or 4 different new statues that they've put out for players, including like Adrian Beltre. And, the Rockies, for the longest time, they've just had the player statue sitting out front, which is a fine statue. Don't get me wrong. I don't have any specific problems with that individual statue. My problem is that was the only statue when, you've been around now for almost 35 years. We're closer to 35 mark than we are the 30 mark at this point. And you just haven't really done enough to celebrate your team's history. So
lots to do.
But enough about talking about the history of the team. It's time to shift into the now. And over the last 2 weeks, there have been a lot of call-ups.
Yeah, and one of these call-ups that we'll mention was just barely sent down because of an activation, but that's okay.
Oh, like just now?
Yes.
I'm not caught up. What is the roster move?
Well, Kyle Karros is back off the injured list, and
excellent news.
Adael Amador was sent back down.
That is what I was expecting, honestly. And we'll talk about Adael a little bit here, but he still ends up being kind of the odd man out, especially when Connor Norby, one of the other guys that they called up, who the Rockies acquired in a trade from the Miami Marlins, has been playing quite well, both defensively, and he's starting to put together some really good at-bats.
Yeah, I guess we can start with Connor Norby, where he was acquired in that trade with Miami, sent Victor Vodnik out there to the Marlins. And Norby hit the ground running there in AAA with the Isotopes for a little bit, had a couple of home runs, and then the Rockies brought him up last week during the Diamondback series, and he's pretty much filled in. It was kind of a Karros went on the injured list. Willie Castro shifted over to third. You put Norby in there at second base, and not the end. Still have his errors. It's still not as crisp there, but for the most part, fairly solid defensively, and is taking some really good at bats over the course of a week. 2 weeks with the team, where it's like, okay, this is a nice, solid little extra infielder that we have that we can move around.
Yeah, it took him a couple days before he got his first hit in a Rockies uniform, and it's kind of tough to say that because he put together some really good at bats, drew multiple walks. Like overall, it felt like we were kind of waiting for him to start putting those hits in. And then since he got his first hit as a Rocky, he now has 6 hits. 4 of those are for extra bases.
Yeah, entering Friday, he's hitting 261, 370, 435 with the Rockies as they start this weekend series against the Guardians. But 7 strikeouts, 4 walks, had a couple of stolen bases, 4 doubles. Like he's starting to put some things together, and you're starting to see like those tools that he showed off with Baltimore and Miami of what makes him an intriguing player. And it's just one of those instances where we're hearing from like interviews and people have run into him that of just how excited he is to be with the Rockies and just finding some stability here is what he hopes. And, just trying to be himself because it sounds like the Marlins were changing, changing a lot of things with him all the time. And it was kind of throwing him off.
Yeah, he was talking about apparently just a lack of consistency in the way that things were being done with his training and with his workouts and everything like that when he was in Miami. And he's been excited to be here in Colorado, and that's sort of what we keep hearing about all the guys that we have acquired at the trade deadline is how excited they are to be here,
Yeah.
which is a very nice change of pace because previously, they'd go through the perfunctory, I'm happy the Rockies wanted me, blah, blah, blah. But you could tell that most players weren't exactly thrilled to get traded to your dear old Colorado Rockies.
No, because just the bad reputation. And that's what this year has been about. That Paul DePodesta and Josh Burns and Warren Schaefer have been focused on is, changing the reputation of the team and the expectations. And so, guys are, I think it's helped them where they come over here and they're like, hey, this is actually fun. Like, we're seeing how they're competing. Like, there's something good building here and we want to be a part of it.
Yeah, and for a lot of these guys, it's not necessarily that they're bad players, but it's sort of the same thing we saw with TJ Rumfield of you've just got a guy who doesn't really have as clear a path towards consistent big league playing time, and you come to Colorado and you can actually have that path forward. Even though the outfield is still crowded and there's still a lot of complaints about that, people are getting their playing time.
Yeah, I think that's one thing with Warren Schaefer this year is you've seen him. Everybody has been utilized one way or another with pinch hits and late game substitutions. Like everybody on that roster, on that bench is getting used in some capacity most every night.
Yeah. And
And
I know that it drives some fans crazy because you'll hit like the 7th or 8th inning and all of a sudden he's pulling a bunch of people and making a bunch of changes. But that's part of the Warren Schaefer MO right now of trying to get everybody as much playing time as you can, not really leave anybody just sitting on the bench constantly, and, utilizing the flexibility that we have as a roster right now.
and he's trying to win ball games. And if it makes sense to make a move in the 7th, you make that move. So a lot of stuff. And so it's cool that Connor Norby, I'm glad that they immediately slotted him in at second base in AAA, and that's the role that he's playing. So him at third. He can play first. So I think they even threw like, oh, we could see him in the outfield too. I'm like, Shafe, no, we have enough outfielders. Stop trying to shove everybody in the outfield. um, but other than that, it's a nice versatile piece that's strictly an infielder. We'll talk about the guys that get displaced because of him on the roster and other guys in our other segment. But it's just nice to see him come up and start having success as his first impression.
Yeah. And then speaking of infielders, of course, we'll touch briefly on Adael Amador. Not really as big of an opportunity that Norby or some of the other guys that have been called up have gotten, just because Amador was kind of called up out of necessity when Kyle Karros hit the 7-day injured list for concussion protocol. He's, of course, been activated. But it was nice to come up here and see Amador shine brightly, at least for a little bit. He got 10 at bats. He had hits in 3 of them, with a home run and a double, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts, looked very solid. And I do think we will see him again later in the season, especially when we get towards, September call-ups and stuff like that. But, Amador's been turning in a solid season down in AAA Albuquerque. and came up and shone for a little bit and got to see that, hey, maybe there's still a little bit of big league talent in this guy.
Yeah, because he's still young, 23, so he's still a baby, more or less. So like, okay, there's some versatility there, and second base is still wide open as far as anybody's concerned going into still at this point and into the off season and whatnot. It's mostly Willie Castro's pretty much, but Willie is going to move around the diamond quite a bit. So you need guys who can back him up there at second base. And, Norby and Amador making the most of their little few opportunities, which is nice to see. You want to see that late in the year.
And it's actually, I'll touch on this just very briefly. It's kind of nice that we have more of a stocked position group at second base right now than we've done previously, because just getting called up to AAA Albuquerque over the last week or two is one of our top second base prospects in Rock Riggio, who we obtained from the Yankees last year. And he hit his first AAA home run, and I'm excited to see what he continued to do in AAA. Had a pretty solid season in AA Hartford so far, but it's one of those ones where right now we are probably deeper in young guys that can play second base than we were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, where it was a big question mark, and there's a path to second base that's a little more cohesive and easier to follow.
Yeah, love to see that. But the biggest name of all of them to get called up last week was, of course, Zach Veen. And the fans were essentially begging, please call up Zach Veen. After back-to-back Player of the Week awards in AAA Albuquerque for the PCL, Zach Veen finally got called up, and it coincided with, I think, Tyler Freeman going on the injured list with some back issues. But it's been great to see Veen up here, and since he has been up here, Warren Schaefer has made good on him being up here, and he has gotten frequent playing time. He's playing regularly.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing such a different Zach Veen. The last time we had talked, we kind of questioned, like, well, what are the Rockies going to do with Zach Veen? Is there room for him? Is he going to be a trade chip? And is he going to be a September call-up? Like, we're going to see Zach Veen, but just what capacity and opportunity presented himself, because he's had a phenomenal year down in AAA Albuquerque, hitting home runs. He's hitting the snot out of the ball. He's being more patient at the plate, like it just a more complete kind of hitter, being able to draw walks and whatnot. And we wondered what is this going to translate to the big leagues? And it feels like, yes, the off the field stuff that he dealt with, with his addictions and everything going throughout the year. And yeah, there's still maturity that come, but he brings this flair that we saw it last year, sometimes in the wrong format. But we knew he had this spark, this edge, this flair that could really help the Rockies, same way that it's done with Cole Carrig. And Veen has come up, and you see like he is a lot more under control as an individual, and acting like he's been there before, in a sense where he's looked more mature. Taking good at bats, modest celebrations when he's doing things, but still playing with that flair that made him such an exciting player, prospect when he was first drafted.
Yeah, and he's still striking out at a decent clip, and not drawing that many walks, and that's something that he's definitely going to need to work on as he continues to stay up here. But the biggest difference right now compared to last year is that he's putting the ball in play, and he's putting the ball into play with authority. He's already got multiple extra base hits, including 2 home runs. One of those was a splash hit into McCovey Cove against the San Francisco Giants, and he was the most recent of only 5 now Rockies hitters to launch that ball into the Cove, because Oracle Park, Candlestick, wherever it was in San Francisco, it's been a tough place historically for the Rockies to hit. And to have Veen come out there and just demolish a ball right into the water is really encouraging to see. We also saw, they didn't call it a steal of home, but it was essentially a steal of home on a wild pitch that was inches away from the plate, and he just went and scored, which is part of what we've seen with Cole Carrig as well, this very aggressive base running from these young guys.
Yeah, and it's playing with your hair on fire. And people rag on his defense, and they'll probably, but Mickey Moniak's no Gold Glover out there either. Like Veen will do the basic things right, you know, and whatnot, and he can still learn and develop. But it's just nice to see him come up and just have a better confidence and opportunity to play and be embraced by the guys in the dugout. Be happy for him, and it was just nice to see everything after everything we learned about him in spring training, to see him now having this small bit of success and looking like a much better ball player than we saw a year ago when he first got called up. No, it's really nice to see, and you happy for the kid.
Yeah, and there were a lot of doubters basically saying like, "Oh, this organization's done with Veen. They hate Veen now because of last year, and the new front office comes in and they're not attached to him at all." But I knew that at some point this season we were going to see Zach Veen. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable to say at all. It just was a matter of when and how, because there's been a lot of different changes going on. We'll talk about some of the other roster changes coming up in the second half. But I think what's important is that Veen proved that he could be an everyday contributor down in AAA Albuquerque. Tore the cover off the ball, was one of the best offensive players in the PCL. And to have him come up and see, not like, he hasn't been, you don't immediately go, well, there's your rookie of the year right there. One, because he's coming up too late, but also just because, he's been not incredible, but he's been good. And he's had results immediately. And that's one of the tough ones, is we see these kids come up and we want results immediately. We immediately want them to see them be the best possible form of themselves, when that's most of the time just not realistic. Your guys like TJ Rumfield and Cole Carrig, those are outliers of how rare that is to have them come up and just be immediately excellent. And we saw last year with Zach Veen with both his personal struggles and his struggles at the plate and on the field, of that is much more like what you tend to see for rookie debuts. And now Veen he's getting a chance to reinvent and re-debut, where he played 12, 13 games last year and didn't make the best impression. But now he's back up. He's played 7 games and is making a strong impression. Like, he's catching notice. People are paying attention to what he is doing.
And like with Amador and Veen, and to an extent Norby, but not really. But the importance of development and making sure guys get ample time to settle in and really find themselves in the minors as a development process. Rumfield's found success because he had adequate time in AAA with the Yankees to develop in the minors. Cole Carrig has had ample time, and it continued on. He found something this year in AAA that was consistent and kept him going, and then he's carried that to the big leagues. How important development time is, as much as we want to rush guys up to the big leagues, it can do a lot of good work in the long run, that they get that ample time to earn their spot, to develop and get called up when the opportunity arises, and they can earn that instead of the club always doing things out of desperation.
Yeah. And think about, that's what Paul DePodesta and Josh Burns have said this year, of, we don't want to call up guys just for the sake of calling them up. We want them to be ready, and we want them to be available to contribute.
Yeah. And so they're doing that, and it's nice to see that with Veen. And like you said, with September is right around the corner, so I'm sure Amador will be back up some point.
Yeah, we're essentially a week and a half away from September call-ups.
Yeah.
But we are going to take a quick break here, our first break of the episode. And we come back, let's talk a little bit more about the roster fluctuations. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on Affected by Altitude. Welcome back to Affected by Altitude. I'm Evan. That's Skyler. And Skyler, we had all these call-ups, including, we have one or two more to mention here. I don't know if we had a chance to talk about it 2 weeks ago, but Jordan Beck is back on the active roster. He's still struggling, but it's nice to see him getting an opportunity again. Something I've been wanting to say with Jordan Beck is, you've got to remember that he is not even half a year older than Zach Veen right now, and a former first-round draft pick. They're not just going to give up on the guy. And I think we're going to see him throughout the rest of this season as all right, kid, prove you belong, like the rest of these guys are doing. After he spent so much of the season on the injured list and then with AAA Albuquerque. So good to see Jordan back. And then we also got the big league debuts of both Nick Frasso and Mark Manfredi, two of the pitchers that the Rockies acquired at the trade deadline. Frasso from the Dodgers and Manfredi from the Brewers. And both of which have had some, Manfredi made his debut over the weekend here, or not over the weekend, earlier this week, and looked very impressive in 1 1/3 scoreless innings. And Frasso's now had a few outings where some of them haven't gone that great, but you can definitely see why the Rockies like this guy, and he's had some good outings as well.
Yeah. Young guys are cycling through pitchers because it's that time of the year. It's like, might as well start getting a look at some guys as we try to figure out this bullpen going into the offseason and try to plan out for 2027. But nope, let's see young guys come up and get an opportunity.
Yeah, I am pretty sure that we will see at some point this year pretty much every pitcher the Rockies traded for at the deadline, making some variety of appearance, except for Aiden May, who's only in high A right now. But you got Mason Adams down in AAA. We might see him at some point. And now we've got the other two guys up here, and it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But there's needed to be some moves,
pitchers we won't see,
and some guys that have had to be moved off of the 40-man roster and off of the active roster for us to get to where we're at right now. And let's start with, since we started with Connor Norby and Adael Amador, we'll start with second base, and we'll start with Edouard Julien, who was designated for assignment last week. And unfortunately, it did not really come as much of a surprise that he was the name getting DFA'd if you had to bring up a second baseman or infielder.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think we both like Edouard Julien and know that wonderful month of April that he had. But from there, it just became tougher and tougher to justify keeping him on the roster. Yeah, he had a good eye at the plate, 39 walks against 71 strikeouts, like good plate discipline for the most part, and could do things like that. But the contact tool and the hit tool just never really clicked. And after that April, he cratered in May and just never picked things up again, which was sad to see because you could see why Eddie could be a helpful person on this team, but it just became tougher and tougher to justify keeping him because he just couldn't hit. Wasn't hitting the ball hard, couldn't hit for power, wasn't putting the ball in play, and when he was, it was a weak ground ball over to the second baseman, that type of stuff. So not really contributing much offensively that you can hold on to.
Yeah, the walks are great. The plate discipline is great, but when it doesn't translate into actual hitting, the game is just too one-dimensional at the plate for him to continue to contribute. And he had, since April, been hitting well under 200 overall. And it was time, especially when you combine the fact that, I love Eddie J as a player and seems like a cool guy, but one of the worst defensive second basemen I've seen in a very long time this season, of just, he can't play the position the same degree that we've been able to see Norby, and Norby's not considered that good of a defensive second baseman, or hasn't been over the last couple of years in his time with the Orioles and the Marlins, but he's already providing a better defensive impact at that position than Julien was. And for Julien, it's sad, but when you have no real defense, so to speak of, especially when you're not really able to play at any other position and the bat's just not there, the writing's on the wall. And it's been unfortunate for Eddie because he had that incredible breakout 2023 season with the Twins, and then just diminishing returns every year since. And so Julien did accept an outright assignment to AAA Albuquerque, which is great. I'm really happy that he's staying with the team, that he contribute down there in AAA. And I hope that our folks, our development staff, can continue to work with him. He's only 27, and see if they can try and get him back to where he was before. But overall, That trade that we made ends up just looking like kind of a wash. Pearson Ole spent the entire year on the injured. Oh, geez. My cat is tangled up in my headphone wires. Buddy, stop. Stop. There you go. Okay. I have a mess over here. But what was I saying? Yeah. For Eddie J, I think it's sad, but it's expected. And now we just move on and see what we can get from the rest of the guys. And, we could potentially reevaluate next year and see if he's with the team next year. But it was the right move.
Yeah. And you'll see if if you tender him a contract in the off season, whatnot. I find it hard that they will, but maybe we'll see what happens. But there's a good player in there, but go get Ron Washington or something. Somebody's got to turn him into a legit second baseman, because look at Luis Arise, what he's done this year at second base, when he was with the Giants and now with the Phillies. Just night and day how good of a defensive second baseman he became. You just need somebody who can teach him. And I don't know if the Rockies really had that this year. Andy Gonzalez, I don't know if he's necessarily the answer for your infield work and whatnot, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's tough because you really do look at, and that's actually a pretty good comp of Arias, not a ton of power, though he's hitting for more power this year, but was a draw walks, don't strike out, and make contact kind of hitter, but was considered not a very good defensive second baseman. And, you look at Arias and go, well, I feel like what they were going for in trying to grab Eddie J was trying to get sort of a poor man's Luis Arias, but he just couldn't get that contact tool going. And then you look at how Arias elevated his game this year, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah. So, but hey, great to have Eddie J. It was fun to have him around.
And speaking of offseason acquisitions that did not work out, the Rockies have also finally designated Michael Lorenzen for assignment. We are waiting to see how that shakes. Oh, he's released officially now. I'm behind the times apparently. Skyler's got all the hot goss.
Yeah,
but that does not surprise me at all. I did not think he would stick around, even if he cleared waivers, which he did. I think he would have. He has the service time to reject any sort of outright assignment.
Yeah, he was getting released no matter what.
He's going to want to try and latch on with a team that can make better use of his talents. But man, Michael Lorenzen signed this offseason for one of the bigger contracts the Rockies offered to anybody. Seemed excited to take on the challenge of Coors Field, and boy howdy, it just did not work out. He finishes his Rockies tenure with over 25 starts, 26 appearances, the most hits given up in the league, the most earned runs given up in the league, an ERA of 7.08, and being worth a negative 1.8 wins above replacement. That's pretty rough.
Yeah, and the big thing for Lorenzen all year is because we saw the instances of what would make him a good starter, and it's throwing strikes. And that was his big issue, is he just could not command his pitches this year. I don't know. You can't really blame altitude because, you look at a lot of the other guys, Tomoyuki Sugano, who throws a bunch of pitches too, peppers the zone and doesn't walk a lot of guys. Lorenzen just could not command anything. And I don't know if it's maybe he got in his head a little bit too much, was overthinking everything, because he's a very analytically smart individual. And sometimes that just can get you into trouble because you're thinking too much, trying to outthink the problem of Coors Field, instead of just go out there and trust your stuff and throw pitches the best that you can and trust your defense. And unfortunately, Lorenzen just got chewed up and spit out by Coors Field especially, but the success on the road really wasn't much success either. I think boils down to that, where he just couldn't throw strikes enough.
Yeah, and what really surprised me with that is that we'd see so much nibbling when it came to him trying to throw pitches. And when he came in, part of what he was talking about in terms of finding success was throwing strikes, pounding the zone, not nibbling and being confident in your stuff. But you'd watch him, and it got worse as the year went on. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or what, but just nibble more and more and not trust his stuff. He tried to limit his arsenal a couple times, and that really didn't have a ton of success. And he ended up having the most walks on the team with 49. And it's a bummer to see. And like you said, Coors Field chewed him up and spit him out. He had an ERA at Coors of 9.12 over 11 starts, but on the road, he struggled as well. In 14 starts, 15 appearances, Lorenzen had a 5.61 ERA, which is better, but still not good. And it was one of those ones where, it felt like every time Lorenzen took the mound, it was a guaranteed loss. Where, the Rockies are not a good team this year, and there's a lot of guaranteed losses on the table. We just watched them get swept by the Dodgers, and that was not particularly surprising. But, you need all the help you can get, and Lorenzen just wasn't providing that help. And you could tell that he was really pretty miserable too. You'd listen to his post-game conversations, and he'd beat up on himself. He'd be very hard on himself about his performance here with the Rockies. And it's, I like Lorenzen. I think he seems like a stand-up dude. I was very excited for him to be joining the Rockies. He was probably the off-season acquisition I was the most excited about, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other questions to bring up of, how can the Rockies combat that kind of stuff, with Alon Leishman and the pitching crew. How can they help when these guys are struggling like that and, losing the mental battle? How can we combat that? And at most part with guys like Lorenzen, where when they can't solve the problem and it's frustrating, I'm doing everything I can right. I'm trying to tinker with everything, but nothing's working. It just starts demoralizing and breaking his brain. And do the Rockies have the personnel? Do they have the people, trained up enough or a plan to combat that stuff when guys are struggling? And in their history, no, they haven't. And it's a really unique problem that I don't know how you fix. It doesn't matter who you put in there. How do you help that? And that's a huge part of it, I think, with Tomoyuki Sugano. He's been pitching for how long? Over in Japan, has all this success. He knows who he is. Unflappable. He'll have his rough games, and you can tell he's not happy with how things have turned out. But then he goes out the next time and throws 2 runs over 6 innings. Like, he just goes out there and continues to just do his thing, unfazed. And unfortunately, it's the intellectual type of pitchers have a really hard time making that adjustment.
Yeah. Sometimes you just get in your own head. You know what it really reminded me of this year is what happened with Antonio Senzatela last year. Is you had a guy who didn't always have the best results, but was at least a serviceable big league pitcher for the most part. And you could tell by the end of the season that he was miserable, and also that he was just completely unusable as a starter in the rotation. Yeah. And, Senzatela was able to turn it around briefly as a reliever here, at least well enough for us to trade him for, Mark Manfredi and Juan Martinez from the Milwaukee Brewers. But for Lorenzen, it's just, you got to hope that he can bounce back in either later this season or next season with a different team that can maybe use him a little bit better and help him find more what he wanted to be doing here. And, it sucks because he wanted to conquer the challenge of Coors Field. Yeah. And, Michael, better pitchers than him have tried and failed.
Yeah.
And it's, it's not anything to be like ashamed about. Coors Field is not a fun place to pitch, but you've got to be super unflappable like Tomoyuki Sugano if you're going to continue to pitch in that environment. It's actually one of the reasons why I would love the Rockies to bring back Sugano next year, especially with a lot more young pitchers coming up, is, sort of just to show, now here's a guy who, even if he's not getting the best results, he's, completely unflappable.
Yeah, and it goes back to no, there's no magic recipe, I think, to conquering Coors Field. The simple thing is throw strikes, and that's about it. you know, don't get yourself into trouble. Get ahead of guys, put them away. Now, again, we keep pointing back to Tomoyuki Sugano, and it's hard not to because he's the guy out of the three, veteran free agents that is still around. Now, Jose Quintana, we'll maybe touch on him later. He's on his way back. He's been injured for several months since May, so we haven't really had him a lot. But Tomo he's shown the recipe. It's throw strikes and trust the stuff you have and just sequence.
Yeah.
Move, hit your spots, and you'll get guys out. You don't
And
have to
that's
have
the
a blazing
recipe
fastball.
for every big league ballpark, not
Yeah.
just Coors Field. To be a good big league pitcher, you've got to hit your spots, you've got to trust your stuff, and you've got to get guys out.
And that's kind of a wider thing that always frustrates me with, we got to figure out how to pitch at Coors Field. The recipe is simple. It's just like you're saying, it's how you pitch in every other ballpark. Are you going to get hurt by a home run? Yeah, probably. No, it's as much on your defense that they have to figure out how to prevent hits with the outfield positioning, with how big the outfield is. That's not on the pitcher. No, you go out and do your stuff and understand what happens there at Coors Field. But ultimately, you have to do your part, throw strikes, get your ground balls, pitch to contact, do what you need to, but just throw strikes. Don't give guys free passes, don't nibble. And that's the problem we saw with Lorenzen. It's just so many short starts end up being a bullpen day, and that cripples the team for the next couple starts of other guys who have to do more, and it taxes your bullpen. So it just sucks. I just feel bad for him.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm pulling it up here. Look, because I'm really curious to see. I want to see where Lorenzen sits in terms of walks overall, and he's not like crazy high in terms of overall league rankings, but he led the team, and he's sitting up there in the basically the top 20 of all pitchers in the league when it comes to walks.
No,
And that would be the thing is walk, crushed. And what do they always say? Walks will haunt. And that is true anywhere.
Yeah. It's just not being able to put guys away, and that was the issue for Lorenzen. Like, you could see why they wanted to have him, and like we knew the good stuff he had. Like, there stands to reason he checked a lot of the boxes the Rockies wanted, but for some reason this year just couldn't throw strikes, and it just got him in way too much trouble.
But yeah, so best of luck to Michael Lorenzen and Eddie J down in Albuquerque. No hard feelings on any of this, but I think the organization made the right move. It probably could have happened sooner, but I do respect that the organization made the tough call and said, even without another starter really prepared, they said, all right, well, we'll give his starts to Tanner Gordon, and it's time to end this experiment.
Yeah, and Tanner Gordon, we won't spend too much time on it, but he's earned that. Has done well in those mop-up roles and really saved the bullpen in some of those games where the starter didn't go very long. And Gordo comes in and fires 5 solid innings. Okay, now let him get his starts in again with the big league level.
And Gordon's been very similar sometimes he gets hit really hard, but he's throwing strikes. He's constantly pounding the zone. And that's something that Warren Schaefer has praised him about in a lot of post-game pressers this year of what did he do? He came in and threw strikes. He came in and pounded the zone. And he just got us through the rest of the game. And sometimes that's all you need.
Pretty much.
But we're going to take one more quick break here. And when we come back, there's some injuries to discuss and some other final roster moves and decisions the Rockies are going to need to make pretty soon here. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on Affected by Altitude. Welcome back to Affected by Altitude with Evan and Skyler. And Skyler, let's start with the most prominent injury of the most recent 2 weeks, and that is that catcher Hunter Goodman has been moved to the injured list with a, what do they call it, a right shoulder strain,
Left shoulder
where
strain.
Goodman had been in and out of games. He got scratched, I think, from 3 straight games, and he was having some difficulties at the plate a little bit before he was put on the injured list. And I do wonder how much the shoulder's been nagging at him. But Goody now on the injured list. Brett Sullivan has assumed the role of starting catcher until he comes back, with Braxton Fulford called up as the backup catcher. And man, that's tough to see because Goody's just been such a key contributor for the Rockies this season. And, this is kind of the problem is guys get hurt. And Goodman has been very lucky so far that he has not really had to spend any time on the injured list. I think this is his first real prolonged stint in his professional career.
Yeah, and it's that left shoulder, so it doesn't necessarily hurt the catching side of things where receiving the ball and whatnot. Because we know he also had like that hand issue earlier around before the All-Star break, but that lead shoulder is on the swings, and during that Arizona series, it had a swing where something just didn't feel right. And so they had held him out during that Giants series. All 3 games, they had tried to put him in, but he had gotten scratched every time they tried to put him in the starting lineup. And it sucks. We'd like to see him get healthy and then go on a tear and hit a bunch of home runs. But fortunately, it's looking Johnny Bench's record is going to stand still. And unless he has a Tulowitzki September, I don't think he's going to break the Rockies home run record. But you just, at this point in the year, you're like, let's get him healthy. As much as it hurts not to have him, let's get him healthy back again. And I think the rest would do him good because just the nature of his position and his offensive capabilities, he doesn't get a lot of time off during the year, which can be tough on a catcher specifically. Having to catch most of the days during the week, and when he's not catching, he's DHing. So,
and even on those DH days, he might get still put behind the plate in a late game substitution.
Yeah, so it does him good to get some rest, I think.
Yeah, you look at the amount of games played, and Hunter Goodman is currently set for 4th most games played by any Rockies player right now. Number 1 is TJ Rumfield, who's played 123, followed by Tovar. Then it is a tie between Kyle Karros and Jake McCarthy at 112, and then at 111 is Hunter Goodman. Yeah. And that's a lot of playing time.
Yeah. Like it breaks down a catcher, I think, even more than other players, because just what they have to do behind the plate, all the preparation they have to do, and then try to focus on the hitting. It takes a toll. And we're seeing with Cal Raleigh this year with Seattle, horrible offensively this year. Just had an absolute stinker of a year after an MVP campaign in 2025. So it takes a toll on catchers. Like, it's hard for them to recover, I think.
Yeah, and the Rockies are really lucky, I think, that Brett Sullivan is having the season that he has been having, where Sullivan is having the best season of his, very limited major league career. He's putting together good at bats. He's getting on base. He's receiving well. Some of the pitchers like throwing to him a lot. And so, honestly, it's a bad situation to have Goodman now out, but it is made better by the fact that Brett Sullivan is ready to suit up and be a essentially replacement level catcher who works well with the pitching staff and is not a complete offensive black hole. Like, he's not perfect, but he goes out there and he'll hit a home run. He'll hit an extra base hit. 7 home runs for him so far this season, which I think is a career high in his limited action. So it could be a heck of a lot worse. And it's one of those ones where I did not love bringing Brett Sullivan in and having him at the very beginning of the season, but every game that passes, you grow to appreciate him just a little bit more.
Yeah. No, an experienced catcher with a long time of professional experience working in the minors, and fortunately hadn't had as much big league playing time, less than 100 days of service time or whatever, but gets an opportunity here and is a leader in that clubhouse, not just on the bench and when he suits up, but in that clubhouse, he's kind of the de facto leader. He's the guy who presented Goodman for the All-Star game. We made that announcement in the clubhouse, is leading the charge in the post game after victories of the player of the game type stuff. No, we always want to focus on the numbers and this or that, but he brings a certain attribute that this team values in that clubhouse that has really helped. And he's still relatively young-ish, but he's an experienced ball player that is good at his craft, and I'm glad that he's made the most of his opportunity.
He really reminds me of Tony Wolters in a way, where just his importance in the clubhouse and overall performance is a lot more important than what he does at the plate. Tony Wolters infamously was not a very good hitter, but the clubhouse loved him, the pitchers loved him, and he would be a perfectly cromulent, pretty good defensive catcher behind the plate. And that's what Sullivan is providing right now.
Yeah. Problem was Tony Wolters was starting every day.
Yes, versus Sullivan is the backup catcher. And now he is starting frequently out of necessity versus he was just your starting catcher.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully Goodman recovers and is ready to rock and roll later in the season. But if not, we're nearing the end of anyway. There's about a month left. 5 weeks or so left of big league baseball this year for the regular season. And if it ends up having to be that you've got to shut him down for the rest of the year, then that's what you do. And I think you say the same thing for the next guy that we need to talk about. And unfortunately, his name is Kyle Freeland, who was removed from his start with the Dodgers, got off to a pretty good start over the first couple innings, and then gave up some bleeding a little bit later in the game. And then after giving up a home run, left with the trainers without trying to throw a pitch. They're calling it a neck issue, but it's one of those ones where, it's a bummer to see, because Kyle has had a very rough season, but over the last few weeks, it's really been starting to put things back together. And now, that is in jeopardy. His 170 inning incentive, which had actually started to look like it might happen, is now completely shot.
It was never going to happen.
There was at least a chance versus now there's none. And also something else he was fighting for was he potentially could have finished the season. I mean, I guess still could, depending on the severity of the injury, with the top mark in Rockies history for strikeouts. He was less than 25 strikeouts away from overtaking Erman on that leaderboard. And he's been striking out guys at a pretty decent clip this year, better than some of his previous seasons. But now you see him leave the game, and it leaves a lot of questions of, one, do we see Kyle Freeland back again this year? And two, if not, who's going to start?
Yeah, it's tough, because you hope it's not the way Freeland's Rockies tenure ends, with an injury or something. You like to see him go out on his own terms, have that complete game that he, you want that type of thing to be his swan song as he goes out. But it would be extremely difficult unless he gets moved into the bullpen and is pitching every 2 innings, every couple of days, every other day. It was going to be really hard after missing time earlier in the season. It would have been really tough for him to get to 170 anyway. Because he's only done that like once in his career, especially since signing that contract. So people that were worried about that, they didn't need to be worried. It wasn't going to happen unless he throws a complete game every single time, which he's motivated to do that. So who knows? But it sucks because he was starting to surge. It was putting together some good classic Kyle Freeland starts. But it does leave this black hole now, especially after you lose Lorenzen. Like, oh no, we just lost another guy to potentially injury. What do we do next? And, kind of running out of options because other guys down in AAA are injured. But do you just bide your time until Jose Quintana can come back? Because he's throwing to hitters on Saturday and then he'll go on a rehab.
Yeah, but that's an if Jose Quintana comes back, because we've now seen it this season where a player goes to rehab and things don't go as planned and you've got to shut him down again. And it's tough because the Rockies, outside of Quintana coming back, which again is not a surefire thing, don't really have a lot of options. The pitching staff down in Albuquerque is pretty bereft of ready to go big league starters right now. You could maybe call up Mason Adams to make his big league debut, but you don't know how that's going to go. Sean Sullivan is on the injured list. Chase Dolander shut down for the year. There's just not a lot of options.
You'd have to turn to like Valente Beozo again. If you wanted to bring up Jack Mahoney, you could. Jake Brooks is an option of guys that are down in AAA, but again, they're been going through the whole season. I don't know if they're quite ready to make that one more jump up to AAA or up to the big leagues. Patrick Weigel is mostly just a opener. He'll throw 2 innings and then hand it off to a Beozo. I think for me, a guy I'd like to see, and I don't know why the Rockies in AAA haven't been using him as one, but Iverson Castellano, I think deserves another look because he's mostly been working as a bulk reliever there in Albuquerque. He'll usually follow like Weigel or something like that and then throw 4 or 5 innings. Can be usually pretty good. Other times he'll get hit with his command and whatnot, but he would be one that maybe I would kind of prefer you give a look at.
Yeah. Or if they might just need to go with some Johnny Holstaff style stuff and get some more bulk relievers up here. And that could be Iverson Castellano. It could be Valente Beozo, who, man, he's had a pretty rough season down in Albuquerque, even by PCL standards. And another guy who's done pretty well in bulk performances for you this season at the big league level is Blas Castano.
Potentially, yes.
But yeah, it's one of those ones where in terms of experienced starters, there's just not that many.
Yeah. And so it makes it tough when it's at this point in the year because it's like, well, do we try to find just some random, a random big leaguer free agent or a guy that we can claim off of waivers, just throw out there for a couple starts if Freeland is down for extended amount of time? Do you re-sign Michael Lorenzen? Like, who knows?
I think that ship has sailed for Lorenzen, but I do think you could see the Rockies do some bargain bin shopping here at the end of the season, bring in some other guys who may have been DFA'd or may get moved around, or do some of those small little cash considerations, minor league trades to try and bring somebody in. But it's tough.
You see Zach Agnos like make some starts again.
And don't get me wrong, Agnos has actually been doing a lot better. But I do wonder if like that one start that he made where he pitched very well, like set off this chain reaction where he struggled immensely for quite some time. And he's finally been putting it back together. But I don't know if you want to put him in that position again of, I think you maybe just want to leave him as continuing to be just a regular multi-innings reliever.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm sure we'll have an answer by the next time Freeland's spot in the rotation comes up, but definitely something to think about.
Jimmy Herget, the starter, finally.
Oh man, that would
so
be.
He can stop pitching late innings and giving up runs in extra innings.
He's been so inconsistent this year. It's such a bummer.
He was sapped of dad strength.
He never really got the dad strength.
I know, he was sapped. The baby's lifting cars right now.
And then the last injury that we want to really talk about here is Tyler Freeman got put on the injured list a couple weeks ago with a lower back injury. He's been having some back injuries this season in general, but now the question is, he's starting a rehab assignment in AAA Albuquerque. Of, do you bring him back at all?
They probably will, and you send Beck back down because they love Tyler Freeman,
despite the fact that he has been pretty bad.
Yeah, it's just kind of like Troy Johnston. He's kind of a vibes guy, and no, that kind of what it comes down to is Freeman and Johnston, and like they're really there for the vibe stuff, and so I think they kind of take some precedence there in that clubhouse where Freeman, they love him, they love the idea of him, unfortunately not doing a whole lot and is abysmal defensively. Like, you cannot afford to put him in the field when you have better options, but he's right-handed and they always want more right-handed bats. So I don't know.
We will see.
We shall see.
But I think that's going to do it here for us on this episode of Affected by Altitude. Thank you so much for listening, as always. Sorry for missing last week as I was having my wounds tended to. But Skyler, where can the folks find you at?
Find me over on the twitters.com at Skyler Timmons or on Blue Sky as Timmons13.bsky.social, and find me over on Purple Row right in the Wednesday rock piles.
You can find me over on Blue Sky at evanlang27.bsky.social. Love to hear from you as always. Catch me doing various odds and ends over on Purple Row. Remember that you can find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on all of your favorite podcasting platforms of choice: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. If it's got podcasts, it's got us on it. Remember, too, if you listen to one of those podcast platforms, leave us a comment, leave us a rating. Really helps with our general engagement. Remember that you can also catch the video version of the show over on youtube.com, where you can catch our new episodes every Monday by smashing that like button and hitting that subscribe button and clicking the bell for notifications and all that stuff. And we can also be found on most social media platforms. It's the same handle as our YouTube platform. That's at Rocky Mountain Rooftop, at ROCKYMTN Rooftop.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to wrap us up here for another episode. We appreciate you as always. Skyler, how about you hit him with it and we'll get on out of here?
Farewell. This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.